Um, Hi to you all. A lot of you I know personally, and some of you I don't yet know personally, but um, good morning to everyone. I've been a guide for quite a while. Um, Once upon a time, long ago, far away, I did the tour guide course at archaeological seminars, and I don't know if there's anyone else from my class who's here in this lecture, but there were a bunch of us.
Hi, Asher.
Hi, Esty. Okay, but is Lee here? Anyway, yeah, Esty was one of my buddies in the course, and for many years, I was working full time in sitting in front of a computer in an office, and I only got to guide occasionally, like once a week or twice a week, for guests of my company, and I would do stuff around the old city, and I just loved it, even though I was doing the same thing every time. And I became an expert at guiding the old city at night when everything was closed, because that's the only time that my company's visitors had available. In recent years, I've become a specialist in the city of David, and I pretty much haven't guided anywhere else in a long time, except for the hiking group that I run, and which is about to restart, believe it or not. And so if anyone wants to go on a Friday hike, send me an email. Anyway, okay, so today's lecture is, of course, about the city of David, because that's my favorite place on the planet, probably. And when I guide the city of David, there's lots of topics that I don't get to talk about because of lack of time or because they're too complicated and tourists wouldn't get into it. And so I'm going to take advantage of all you people to show you a bunch of I think, are fun topics in the city of David. Let me share my screen, and I'm about to show you a PowerPoint presentation, which I will be glad to share. Let me see, that's what I need. Okay, so you should now all see the screen. Wait just 1 second. Okay. All right, here we go. So I'm going to cover 3 main topics. By the way, I have no idea how long this is going to last. I will stop at, if it takes me up to 12:30, I will stop no matter what. Maybe it will end sooner, maybe not.
Asher, the screen is very blurry.
I have a super important phone call. You know what? Never mind. I'll do it later.
Asher?
Yeah?
The screen is very blurry. Is that the quality on your screen? The text is not clear.
Oh, no, I see it bright and clear.
It's blurry for everyone. It might have something to do with your internet connection.
Let me see.
Actually, it's not always blurry. It goes in and out. But I should just continue. Don't worry about it. Okay.
All right. All right, fine. Okay, I'm going to cover 3 main topics. 1 second. There we go. The first topic is the so-called Pilgrimage Road, sometimes called the Step Street, which is the main street of Jerusalem. And you all know about that. It's been in the news, and you all know about the drainage channel underneath it. But I wanted to tell you a few things about it. And I'll try to focus on things that you don't already know. 1 second. I need a pointer. There, can people see that dot?
Yes, we can. You're good.
Okay, great. Okay, now we're in business. Okay, so here you see, by the way, I hate this diagram because it shows, for example, the Pool of Siloam as it was 2,000 years ago, but it shows the Temple Mount as it is today. So there's sort of a mishmash of old and new. But anyway, it shows the path of this street, which goes from the Pool of Siloam, which is where pilgrims would start out their visit in Jerusalem, and they'd go up the hill and they'd end up at the foot of the Temple Mount. They could also branch off on this side road and go in through the what we call the Hulda Gates, although I doubt if that's really the correct name, and go up to the Temple Mount that way. Okay, so this street has been excavated many times by many people, starting with Charles Warren, Kathleen Kenyon, and it was in 2006 that Roni Reich and Eli Shukrun found the original Pool of Siloam, as opposed to what everyone used to call the Pool of Siloam. And they also tried to find the road, but Dafka, the spot where they started to dig, there was nothing left of the original road. But they did get into the drainage channel underneath the road and cleared that out, and now it's of course open to the public, and you've all been through it lots of times. It was just bad luck that where they dug in a place that's now called Yovel, at that exact spot, all the original paving stones had presumably been stolen or looted by some later building project in history. There was an inauguration ceremony of the street proper in 2009, which was completely fake because even now it's still not open to the public. And there was this statement, which hopefully you can read, by the US ambassador, which is really very emotional, and it's really true, and it's really exciting to have this street that the pilgrims walked on 2,000 years ago. And here's a video. I'm going to attempt to show this video. Hopefully you'll be able to see it and hear it. This is Ir David propaganda. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but we'll do like 2 minutes of it.
כשהתחלנו לחפור פה, אז ידענו שיש פה את הרחוב, אבל לא ידענו איפה בדיוק הוא מתחיל. ואני הייתי בצוות שחשף את המדרגות ממש בפעם הראשונה, ואז ידענו שזה המקום.
אני בעצם עושה פה את הסינון הראשוני, ומפה זה יוצא על מסוע של 200 מטר לפני אדמה, שם זה עובר סינון יותר מעמיק של מטבעות, טבעות, חרוזים, חותמות.
על כל שק שיוצא מהחפירה אנחנו רושמים מספר של השכבה שחפרנו ותאריך שחפרנו אותו, ואנחנו שולחים לסינון.
For the past 6 years, we've been working on excavating intensively the main street, the Pilgrim Street, which led from the Siloam Pool up to the Temple Mount, about 600 meters long, 8 meters wide, and would have housed the thousands of pilgrims which arrived in Jerusalem from surrounding areas in order to take part in the ceremonies on the temple. In 70 CE, Jerusalem is destroyed by the Romans, who burn it, as Josephus says, all the way down to Siloam. And we've been exposing that destruction layer, which included the food and the coins and the glass vessels and the pottery vessels, which smashed onto the street and then were covered over by the buildings that collapsed and sealed that destruction layer, which waited 2,000 years for us to come and excavate it.
Okay, enough of that. You get the idea. It's propaganda, but it's nice propaganda. Okay, it's nice propaganda, and in this photograph, you can see a section of the street, which, as I said, is still not open to the public, but it will be soon. But as we were discussing earlier, before the lecture started, it's being excavated right now. And so it's actually sort of dangerous to go through there. I've guided it a few times to people with protexia. And I actually almost got knocked over by one of the buckets, one of the burlap sacks going on the conveyor belt. I think here there's a spot where you can see, wait, where's my pointer? There. You can see here there's some spots where there's some broken paving stones, and it's believed that that's where the Roman soldiers would have smashed the stones to get down to people, the Jews who were hiding down below as the temple was being destroyed. Okay, now on to stuff a little bit more interesting that you guys probably don't all know. Here's a picture of me sitting on what's called the podium. And it's just that, it's a constructed thing at a spot where the street is particularly wide and relatively flat. So it's sort of a plaza. And when I was first introduced to this, they said, oh, well, it's a podium, and we have no idea what it was used for. Maybe it was a soapbox for people making political speeches, or for salesmen, or maybe it was the base for, I don't know, a menorah, or I don't know, a planter, who knows, some kind of monument. But now people, like, as they say, nafal asimon, people have finally realized that this is probably something that's referred to in the Gemara, in Baba Metzia. It talks about a special stone that was called, in Hebrew, Even Toen, and this was a place where if you lost something, you would go there, and knowing that anybody who found something would go there and announce it. And that's just straight out of Baba Metzia. So do we know for sure that this podium is the Even Toen, the claimant stone? Of course not, but maybe it's good enough to tell tourists. Another cool thing they found on the street is this thing which they call a measuring table. And they believe that this was found together with a whole bunch of stone weights. And they believe that this might have been the office of the agoronymos, who is the market supervisor, and this was used for measuring volume. So there's what looks like a cup there, and it actually has a little hole in the bottom that goes all the way through, but you put your finger on it and block the exit, and then anything you pour in there gets measured to be the right amount. And so this was the standard unit. I don't know whether it was a liter or half a liter or something like that, but this was apparently a standard. And they've only found, in all of the excavations done in the Jerusalem area, they found exactly 2 others. One was found like in the 1970s in the Rova, and one was found outside of Jerusalem somewhere, and that's it. So it's sort of cool, and it shows that this was an active marketplace. So if you want to call this plaza the Machane Yehuda of the Second Temple period, maybe you're right. They found at least one of these. This is a Tyrian half shekel. This is the half shekel coin that people paid when they went up onto the Temple Mount. It's not clear to me exactly when you paid that tax. Was it every time you went up to the Temple Mount, or only on holidays? Or I don't think anyone really knows. But you can clearly read here on the coin where it says Tyroi, so that's Tyrian, I guess. My Greek is not that great. Okay, in the drainage channel underneath the street, they found this bell, which I'm sure you all heard about, so I don't want to bore you, but it's made out of solid gold. It was probably from the garment of the high priest. And here, I have a video here that is really hokey. I'll just show you the beginning of it. There's the high priest.
We can't see it. We can't see it.
You know what? Forget it. This is really not important. Okay.
Asher, if you send the link, then we'll add it later, okay?
Yeah, okay, no problem. Wait, it's playing my background. And now it's a very emotional video where the speaker is mostly Eli Shukrun, and he's telling how amazing it is that they found this spell from the garment of the high priest. And then it cuts to some musicologist at Tel Aviv University, I think, who explains that when you ring, okay, the bell, it still rings. If you shake it, you can hear this ring, and in the video you can actually hear it. You can hear the actual ring. And according to this woman's analysis, the frequency of the ring is 246 hertz, which corresponds to note B on the scale, like C, D, E, F, G, H, G, A, B, so it's T on the scale, and it's 3 means the third octave. And it turns out that 246 is the gematria of Pa'amon, and I'm sure that's what they had in mind when they tuned the little clapper inside the bell. Anyway, that's obviously ridiculous, but that's what Eli Shukrun and this woman tell with a straight face in this video. Another oddity, there's this, as some of you who know me, you know that I'm into plants. So this is a very well-known plant. It's called shikaron, which sort of means drunk. Actually, it's called shikaron zahuv, and it's in English it's called golden henbane. It's a very poisonous plant, but the flowers have a very unique shape. And in antiquities, Josephus uses this flower to illustrate the shape of the hat that was worn by the high priest. And then I have this quote here from Nachshon Zanton, who's one of the archaeologists who works in the city of David, and he says how exciting it is. But every time he sees this plant growing today, it reminds him that the things he's digging up relate to real things, the Kohen Gadol. Anyway. Okay, Esty, is this your ring? Somebody lost a ring. They found it in a mikveh. It was actually found by the Sifting Project. It's bronze, it's set with a gemstone, and anyway, it sort of brings things home that this place is real. I really like this ring. I carry around a picture of it. Okay, and now for the most important thing of this part of my presentation. The question is, who built the road? Now, for many years, tour guides have been telling hundreds of thousands of tourists that this road was built by King Herod, and that it was part of a huge project that included the rebuilding of the temple, the expansion of the Temple Mount, especially to the south, the construction of the royal portico on the southern extension, and according to the archaeologists, none of that is true. According to the archaeologists, Herod died before the road was completed. And the current theory, which is, it's still a theory, but it's being seriously considered, is that the person who did finish the project was Pontius Pilate. So that's based on the finds of various coins. So in that bit of a video I showed, there was a mention that when Jerusalem was destroyed in 70, the buildings that were burned and collapsed fell on the street and sealed the destruction layer. And it's in that destruction layer that they found coins like this, which date to the revolt. Those are the most recent coins that were found. Under the street, they found coins like this and this. And it's this one in particular is the more recent of the two. And this was the latest type of coin that was found under the street, and it dates to the reign of Pontius Pilate. Now, there's actually some debate about the exact dating, but this is approximately correct. But there's some professional disagreements about it. And it's just very interesting that it wasn't Herod who completed the project. And one might, if you really want to claim that it had to be King Herod who did it, you might want to say, well, this one coin, well, you know, it's a newer coin that somehow fell in through a crack and ended up underneath the street. But that doesn't hold water, because for two reasons. First of all, they found several of these. They found a bunch of these coins in various spots. So these really are coins that were underneath the street, that were there when the street was built. And second of all, there are other coins that were a little bit later than this, that were later than Pontius Pilate, that were very, very, very common, that archaeologists have found hundreds and hundreds of them. And not a single one of those later coins were actually found under the street. I should tell you that my source of information about coins is through a guy named Donald Ariel, who everyone who knows him calls him Tzvi, who's a very good friend of mine, and I actually work for him once a week in the coin department of the Israel Antiquities Authority. So I sort of have inside information about coins. Okay, here's a special find. Again, you probably have all seen this, but there's some interesting perspective on it. Okay, it says, okay, when it was first found, they said that the letters say that it's Dalid Kaf Aleph Lamed Yud Hey. And Daka is the Aramaic word that means pure, and Lamed Yud Hey might mean to God. Okay, this reading is rather dubious because, first of all, the Aleph is not at all clear that it's an Aleph. I don't know what it is. On the second line, the Hey looks a little more like a Het to me. I don't know. Okay, but the original explanation of this thing that was found in 2011 was that it was sort of like a kashrut symbol, that if you wanted to designate something as being intended for use in a temple, you would pay a fee and they would give you this seal that you would put on like a jug. Like, for example, the jug of holy oil that we talk about so much in Hanukkah, which is, of course, a folktale. But anyway, so this was the original explanation. But you know what? No way. It doesn't even say Zayin Kaf Aleph Lamed Yud Hey, or at least it doesn't really mean what it says that it means. About 3 years after it was found, Professor Shalom Naeh proposed a different reading. He says it goes like this. It's actually 3 words, not 2. On the first line, the Dalet Kaf is an abbreviation for Dakar, which is the Aramaic word for ram, like Zahar, which is one of the types of sacrifices that people often offered in the temple. The Aleph at the end of the first line means the day of the week. But like I said before, it's really hard to read, so maybe it's a Gimel, which means a Tuesday. And then in the 3 letters in the next line is an abbreviation. It doesn't mean to God. It's an abbreviation for LeYehoyariv. Yehoyariv was one of the Mishmarot, one of the watches of Kohanim who were on duty for each week of the year. And the explanation goes like this. If I'm bringing a sacrifice to the temple, depending on the type of sacrifice, there's certain add-ons that I need to get. And those add-ons were obtained in the temple itself. I would go to the cashier's office, I would pay money, and they would give me a token that showed I had paid, which I could then take to the storeroom and cash in the token for those add-ons, whether it be olive oil or flour or whatever. And so in order to prevent Ramaim, and that word actually appears in the description of this in the Talmud, in order to prevent misuse, the token had on it the date, so that if anyone found it tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to use it. It was only good on a specific day of the week, in this case, Sunday or maybe Tuesday, and was only good for a particular week, the week which the order of Kohanim called Yehoyariv was on duty. And anyway, so that somehow seems like a more satisfying explanation, a little bit too complicated to explain to tourists. When you get my presentation, when you get the PowerPoint file, you can click on these 2 hyperlinks. The second one, there's a lecture by Professor Zev Safrai, who gives a slightly different interpretation, but it amounts to the same thing. And of course, neither one of them agrees with the original interpretation that was actually proposed by Roni Reich and Eli Shukron. Okay, that finishes the first topic. Wow, and I used up half an hour. That's way too long. All right, let me move on, try to pick up the pace, because we have some more complicated stuff to come. Okay, the next topic is boule. A boule is, as you all know, is a type of seal, or actually a seal impression, that was used to authenticate a document. In other words, if I had a contract, I would hire a scribe to write up the contract, and both parties to the contract would press their signature rings into soft clay that was attached to the string that tied up the parchment that had the contract written on it. However, it's important to know that that's not the only use of boule. Boule were also used to seal like packages or like wooden boxes that had important deliveries in them to show that they were official, and also papyrus. And they know this because sometimes on the back of the boule you can see the impression of the string, if it was a piece of string that tied around a piece of parchment, and sometimes you can clearly see the fibers of the papyrus, and sometimes you can see what looks like wood. Okay, a slight digression to something that you all know about. This is a picture of the famous inscription in Silwan from a First Temple period tomb, and you can all even read this. It says right here, that's Zayin Aleph Taf Zot, and we believe the missing words here are Gvurat, the burial place, of, and then a name, and the name is gone except for the last three letters, which are Yud, Hey, Vav. So it says, this is the grave of Exiyahu. And the X could be Nitan, like in Netanyahu, or Yisha, as in Yishayahu, or Yirmi, as in Yirmiyahu, or anything like that. We don't really know. But it goes on to say, Asher al Habayit, who was on the house. And we know that that phrase, Asher al Habayit, which appears several times, refers to the chief of staff. Now, in Yeshayahu, in chapter 22, it mentions a guy named Shevna who carved for himself a very fancy tomb, which caused him to be dismissed from his job. And Shevna, which is the name that appears in Yeshayahu, was actually short for Shivanyahu. And the word Shivanyahu would fit just right in that hole. Is that what it really says? No one, of course, knows. Okay, back to the main topic of boule. So here's a picture of the bunch of the boule that were found by Yigal Shiloh in the excavations in, I think they were found in 1982, plus or minus a year. For me, that's exciting because I worked as a volunteer in the excavations in Ir David for 3 summers in 81, 82, and 83. Okay, so in this photograph, you're seeing boule that were found in the excavation. Okay, this is a picture of a boule that was not found in an excavation. It was sold by an antiquity. It was sold by an antiquities dealer to a wealthy collector who lives in London, and the wealthy collector, before he bought it, with a promise of confidentiality, showed it to Benjamin Mazar because he wanted it to be authenticated. He didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on something that was a fake. Benjamin Mazar told him that in his opinion it was authentic, and he begged the guy to let him publish it, which he did, and that's why I have a photograph. This is from the article published by Benjamin Mazar. And this, as you all know, is a very famous one. It says, what it actually says is, Liberachiyahu ben Neriyahu HaSofer. This is the scribe who wrote the book of Jeremiah. But the question is this real or is it a fake? Is it a fake that fooled Benjamin Mazar? And the answer to that question is, to this very day, nobody knows. It depends who you listen to. You can find archaeologists, prominent Israeli archaeologists, who will say quite authoritatively and convincingly that this is a fake. Mazar was wrong, it's a fake, the guy got taken. And you can find other archaeologists, mostly not Israeli ones, who will say, no, it's the real thing. There's no reason to doubt it. So the bottom line is we don't really know. These are 2 boule which are my favorite to talk about when I'm showing Area G to tourists. And I'll just mention quickly that they are 2 officers in the court of Yehoiachin, the last king of Judah, and they reported to the king all the nasty things that Jeremiah was saying, and he told them to do whatever you think is necessary. And I like to point out that when you read that verse, the first verse in chapter 38 of Jeremiah, it lists the names of these 4 officials. And the names are very odd and no one pays any attention to the names, but here they are, 2 of the names. Gedaliahu ben Pashhur and Yehuchal ben Shlemiyahu ben Shvi. Anyway, those are famous ones. Okay, then there's a more recent boule that was not found in Area G. This one was discovered by Eilat Mazar in what we call the Southern Wall excavations in the very southern, in the south eastern corner of the excavations, in the most which is probably the most exciting part that no one ever goes to, because that's where you see all the first temple period stuff. And it has this the bula of King Hezekiah, and it says Hyoscyamus, and then it says Ahaz. And it was Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, the king. And so why was this seal found? Does that mean that King Hezekiah was personally there and that he personally stamped his ring into that piece of soft clay? Maybe, but probably not. And I suddenly had this inspiration as I was reading Megillat Esther, and I read, Vayasar ha'melech tabato asher hevir mehaman vayitena leMordechai. King Achashverosh gives his ring to Mordechai, and he tells Mordechai Esther to write whatever they want to counteract the decree by Haman and to seal it with the king's seal. So here you have it, the seal of a different king. Okay, here's another relatively new bula that was also found. It was actually found right next to the one of Hezekiah, and there are those who claim that this is the seal of Isaiah the prophet, Yeshayahu Hanavi, and I personally think that's ridiculous. It says here it's like there's missing letters filled in, but I think it's wishful thinking. It would say Le Yeshayahu Navi, but that makes no sense at all. First of all, he wouldn't have called himself Yeshayahu Navi. He would have called himself Yeshayahu ben so and so. And furthermore, it would have said Hanavi, and the whole thing makes no sense. It's not the seal of Isaiah, but a lot of especially Christians think it really is. Here's another cool bula, which is again someone who's mentioned in Tanakh, and because this guy has a pretty unusual name, Nitan. There's always a lam in a prefix. Nitan Melech Eved Hamelech. So this is a guy named Nitan Melech, and according to Tanakh, this guy Nitan Melech was an officer of Josiah, of Yoshiyahu. And is it the same guy? Well, we don't know for sure, but you know what? It really could be. The dating is right. We're talking about the 7th century. It's a very unusual name. It's not like his name was Yosef or Yaakov or Avraham or something. I mean, Nitan Melech, what kind of weird name is that? So maybe it is the same guy who's mentioned in the book of 2 Kings. Here's one of my favorite nubula, and this was found actually in 2013 below Robinson's Arch, but it took several years before the sifting project sifted through all the stuff. They dug up there and found it, and it says Adoniyahu Asher al Habayit. So it's the same phrase I mentioned before, Asher al Habayit, which I translated as chief of staff. That's my translation. Other people translate it differently. So this says to Adonijah that this is the seal of Adonijah, the chief of staff. Okay, so we know all about Adonijah, who had himself crowned king, the son of King David, in Chagit, and obviously this is not that Adonijah because this is from the 7th century, and King David did not live in the 7th century, nor did his son Adonijah. Could it be that this Adoniyahu Asher al Habayit is the guy whose name was cut off in that inscription in the first temple period tomb in Silwan? Maybe it has the right number of letters. It would sort of fit in that hole. We'll never know for sure until someone invents a time machine. But I think it really is neat to even think that maybe we now know what the name really was. Okay, and now I'm moving on to my last topic, which will take me at least 20 minutes. So we're going to go until 12:30, at least. Okay, the topic is, where is the Akra or the Chakra? This is a very complicated topic. Anyone who guides the Givati parking lot is somehow expected to talk about the Chakra. That's not really correct at all, but we'll get there in a minute. And I have here a really nice coin, a picture that I found from internet, and you can clearly read, if you know Greek, that says Theo, meaning God, Epiphanos, which means the image of God, and that says Basilios Antiochos. So there you have it. And the Epiphanos tells you that it's Antiochus IV. Okay, so everyone knows the story of the Akra, right? The Seleucids, the Syrian Greeks, built this fortress to oppress the Jews. The Jews and the Maccabees destroyed it when they liberated Jerusalem, and let's eat latkes, and everyone lives happily ever after. And that is so far from reality. It is just, I mean, it's not even close. Unfortunately, the actual history of that period is very complex. And I have to apologize that the next 7 slides, it took me 7 slides to summarize the history of this period, which is really necessary to understand the whole issue of where is the Akra fortress and what was the Akra fortress. And this is a great example of something. There ain't no way you're ever going to tell this to tourists unless they happen to be historians or archaeologists. Okay, here goes. If you want to turn off, if you want to not listen to the history, you can like ignore the next 7 slides. Okay, first of all, we have 2 written sources about the Akra. There's the Book of Maccabees, which was written shortly after the Akra was destroyed, and Josephus, who wrote 200 years later. So who are you going to believe more? Well, it's actually debatable. Josephus had some good inside sources, but still, he was 200 years later. Okay, the history. You all know that when Alexander the Great died in 323, his empire divided into 3 parts. And at first, it was the Egyptian part, the Ptolemies, who controlled Eretz Yisrael. And then in the year 200, there was the Battle of Banyas, where the Seleucid armies, led by Antiochus III, beat the Ptolemies and take over Israel. So this is a dramatic change. Israel is now subject to Antiochus, who rules from Syria. When Antiochus conquered this country, when Antiochus III conquered this country, the Jews actually supported him, and he remembered that support, and he was actually very friendly to the Jews. And he gave them religious independence, and he lowered their taxes, all because they helped him take over the country from his enemy, the Ptolemies. Okay, his successor was Antiochus IV, whose coin I showed you in the beginning. And in 168, he launches a military campaign to take over, to continue what his father had done, to take over even more of the Ptolemies empire. And he's marching, in the year 168, he's marching towards Alexandria. It looks like he's going to take over Egypt completely, and now there will be only 2 countries. Rome does not like this idea. They send a high-ranking delegation headed by an ambassador named Gaius Popilius Laenas. And he was a very old guy, this ambassador. And the story goes that he met Antiochus IV, that this ambassador stands in the middle of the road, and Antiochus is marching with his soldiers toward him. And this guy stands there with a large walking stick, and he, I don't know, maybe he holds up his hand and says, "Stop." And Antiochus IV approaches him, and he says to him that the Senate of Rome is demanding that Antiochus IV cease and desist in his attack on Egypt and go back home to Syria. And Antiochus IV says, "Well, I don't know, I'll think about it. I don't really know why I should have to do that. And I mean, how serious are you anyway? And what if I just conquer it and we'll all be happy?" And the ambassador takes his walking stick and he draws a circle in the dirt around Antiochus IV and says to him, "I'll tell you what, I'll let you think about it for a while, but before you step out of that circle, I want your answer to bring back to the Senate in Rome." And Antiochus IV says, all right, forget it. I'll go back home to Syria. He wasn't happy. Meanwhile, while that was going on, going back a ways, when Antiochus IV came to power, the Kohen Gadol was a guy named Honyo, or Onias in English. And in 175, shortly after he came to power, Antiochus IV is approached by a guy named Jason, and he offers a large bribe to Antiochus IV and asks to be appointed as a new high priest. And Antiochus IV accepts the bribe and makes Jason new high priest. And part of the deal is that Jason has to send an annual payoff to Antiochus. But 40 years later, Jason sends his annual payoff to Antiochus via a messenger, a friend named Menelaus. And Menelaus decides to keep the money, and instead he meets with Antiochus IV and convinces him that Jason is a terrible high priest, and to kick him out and to make Menelaus the new high priest. And it works, and Antiochus buys it, takes the bribe, and Jason, the old high priest, flees across the Jordan River. Okay, several years later, 3 years later, Jason, okay, this is when Antiochus IV is in Egypt, attempting to conquer all of Egypt. He hears a rumor, which turns out to be false, that Antiochus IV had been killed in battle, and he raises an army of 1,000 mercenaries, and he tries to conquer Jerusalem because he figures if Antiochus IV has been killed, he can reinstate himself as the high priest and make lots of money. But his plan doesn't work. He fails to conquer Jerusalem, and the word gets back to Antiochus IV, who, as you can imagine, was not pleased. Okay, so when Antiochus IV leaves Egypt and comes back home to Syria, he stops in Jerusalem and he is seriously pissed. And according to the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1, it says, he suddenly fell upon the city, and he burned it with fire, and he destroys the whole city, and he surrounds the city of David with a big strong wall and fortified towers and turns it into a fortress. This is the Akra. And living in the Akra, there were Hellenizers, and there were mean people, and whenever Jews went up to the temple, they would attack the Jews. And it was a horrible threat, and it was like a thorn right, not in the side, but in the center of Jerusalem. Antiochus IV is so annoyed at the Jews, at Jason, that he reverses the pro-Jewish policies of his father that had still been in effect until then, and he outlaws circumcision and keeping the Shabbat, and that triggers the Maccabean revolt. So if you want to look at it this way, we brought it on ourselves. He started out being a friend to the Jews, but not after what Jason did. Josephus tells the story slightly differently. He says that Antiochus burned the nicest parts of town, and he built a fortress, and the word for fortress in Greek is Akra or Chakra. And he said that the fortress was built in the lower city, and it was high and towered over the temple, which is a little bit hard to understand, but we'll talk about that soon. Okay, then that was in 168. In 164, 4 years later, Judah the Maccabee liberates Jerusalem and he rededicates the temple, and we celebrate that as a holiday of Hanukkah. But guess what? He did not succeed in conquering the Akra. there were still Seleucid soldiers in Jerusalem, in the fortress, blocking access or making access to the temple difficult for the Jews, even after Judah the Maccabee had his great victory. That was 164. But in the same year, Antiochus IV dies suddenly. That might explain why Judah the Maccabee was so successful, because Antiochus IV dying probably created all kinds of turmoil. Judah's successor, Judah's killed 4 years later, and Judah's successor, Yonatan, tries to conquer the Akra and fails. But it's not clear how hard he really tried. He had actually had a very good relationship with the enemy, with the Seleucid Empire. There was a guy named Alexander Balas, who was one of the rulers that succeeded Antiochus IV. If I remember correctly, Yonatan, like the Maccabee, was actually at Alexander Balas. He was an invited guest at Alexander Balas's wedding. So, he probably wasn't going to try real hard to kill his soldiers and kick them out of Jerusalem. Anyway, in 143, Yonatan is killed by a guy named Tryphon. He was killed. He was basically he was invited to something, and then he was knifed. And he's succeeded by his brother Shimon. And finally, in 141, 23 years after Judah conquers Jerusalem, Shimon finally conquers the Akra. And he says, from now on, every year, the 23rd of Iyar, we're going to celebrate the great victory over the Seleucids, where we finally kicked them out of Jerusalem. And of course, that's been totally forgotten. And it says in the book of Maccabees that he actually fortifies the area, and he stationed his men there. Okay. Josephus tells the story slightly differently. He describes something which doesn't appear in the book of Maccabees. He says that Shimon destroyed the Akra down to its foundations so they could no longer be used against the Jews, and that he even dismantled the hill the Akra stood on and turned it into a flat plain, and it took them 3 years to do it, working day and night, but they did that until it was completely flattened. Okay, so there's some contradictions in the story. Again, who do you want to believe? Okay, this is my last chapter in the historical background. A few years later, a few years later, it was 141, I said it was captured, right? Yes, 141. Okay. In 133, the son of Shimon, named John Hyrcanus, is now the high priest and king, and he doesn't have a very good relationship with the Syrian Greeks. And Antiochus VII, who was a very powerful ruler, one of the successors, of course, of Antiochus IV, attacks Jerusalem. And Hyrcanus fortifies the city, but it doesn't really work. The city is forced to surrender. He pays a huge ransom. The story of that ransom is told in Josephus. He takes the money from King David's tomb. It's a great story. And then John Hyrcanus becomes a vassal of Antiochus VII. And basically, he becomes a more or less loyal servant of Antiochus VII. And I'll just mention here that Antiochus VII allows him to mint coins with the name Antiochus VII on them. And Hyrcanus did that, and they were like the main coins used in that period of time. There are lots of them found. Okay, so where was the Akra? There are all kinds of possibilities. I'm not going to go through this diagram in detail, but this is from a paper by Yoram Safir, and he shows all the different options that different people have proposed for where the Akra might have been located. This is the Temple Mount. Some people proposed that it was to the south. Some people proposed that it was just to the north. Some people proposed that it was in the upper city. Some people proposed that it was in north of the upper city. All kinds of possibilities. I believe that Safir himself agreed yeah, here it is. Yeah, he agreed with this one that it was just south of the temple. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so basically there were I can summarize that whole thing, and there were 4 theories. One theory was that the Akra was just south of the Temple Mount. Theory number 2 is that it was a little bit far, not adjacent to the Temple Mount, but a little bit farther south, under what's called the Givati parking lot. And there were 2 other theories saying that it was in the upper city or north of the Temple Mount, but neither of those theories really hold water, in my opinion at least. And so we're really down to 2 main theories. Okay. Theory 1, just south of the Temple Mount, is the one that I like. It goes like this. Here's a diagram from Lee and Rittmeyer, and it shows the Temple Mount as it was before King Herod, as it was in the Hashmonae period. And he's proposing that the Akra was built here, adjacent to the temple, to the small square Hashmonean Temple Mount. Here it is in a larger diagram. So he's proposing that it was here, and there's a big cistern which he would call the cistern of the Akra. Here's the square Temple Mount. Here's drawn, superimposed on it is the larger Herodian Temple Mount, which means that any remains of the Akra are underneath the Temple Mount of today and are not going to be found anytime soon. And here you see the city of David, and notice this area here is where the Givati parking lot is, and here it's labeled, they found a wall and a glacis, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. There was also a wall and glacis found over here, and they appear in this diagram to indicate that these things have nothing to do with the Akra at all, and it is in fact the city wall. That at the time, in the time that the Akra was built, the city wall went like this, the so-called first wall. We'll talk about that more again in just a few moments. Okay, theory 2 is that the Akra was found in the Givati parking lot, and in 2016 there was this big announcement, and there's all this evidence that they found in the Givati parking lot, and in the annual archaeological conference, I guess it was in 2017, they had tours that showed you the remains of the Akra in Givati. I actually led one of those tours. I remember before I started my tour, well, I ran into Esti, but I also ran into Gabi Barkai. And I said, Gabi, come on my tour. You want to see where the Akra was located? And he gave me this look. He like rolls his eyes because I knew, I knew that he doesn't at all believe that the Akra was located in Givati. So I was joking, and there's no way he was going to come on my tour. Anyway, okay, so what was the evidence? They found the wall of the fortress that was 3 meters thick. There was a tower. They found a glacis, which I'll explain that in a second, but basically it's a sloping pile of dirt that protects the wall. They found a whole bunch of coins. Now, the stuff here in orange is in orange because it actually does not fit in with the claim that all this stuff has to do with the Akra. This says that there were 2 phases in the construction of the glacis, and the later phase had lots of coins dating to the time of Antiochus VII, not the 4th. So that would seem to indicate that the glacis was built after Antiochus IV built the Akra, and that it can't have anything to do with it. But everything else apparently seems to support the claim that Antiochus IV built the Akra in the Givati parking lot. Oh, and they found arrowheads with the logo of Antiochus IV. I mean, if that's not conclusive evidence, I don't know what is. Okay. Some pictures. Okay, here's our artist's reconstruction of the glacis. Here's the wall that would have been the wall of the Akra, maybe. And you see there's layers of packed earth, and the layers are actually quite distinct. Some of them are dirt, and some are chalk, and some are rocks, and some are pottery. And it was all put here very deliberately, and it's all packed down on top with a smooth layer of chalk. And the idea is that anyone attacking will have to, well, first of all, be in plain sight as they approach the wall, easy to shoot an arrow at, but also it makes it much harder for them to undermine the city wall, which is, sorry, the wall of the Akra. And that's the most important thing, to prevent the wall from being undermined. Okay, and here are the finds that you can actually see in the Givati parking lot, which prove that the Akra was there. Okay, this is part of a wall that was dated to the Hashmonite period. Here's an adjacent tower. Here you see these layers. That's part of the Glacis, the Chalak Laka in Hebrew. And this wall here, this is the wall that bounded the Glacis. So if I go back a slide, you'll see that this is the wall, that bounding wall was down here, and they found the Glacis and the tower and the wall. Okay, it all fits together. They found a whole bunch of Rhodian stamped handles, which proved that there were a lot of Syrian Greek soldiers stationed here, because this is wine that's imported from Greece and distinctly not kosher. And these are the arrowheads with the logo of Antiochus IV. I didn't really say that because it's actually not. And then just to continue, they also explained that when Yigal Shiloh excavated in area G, a little bit to the east, he found a continuation of the same Glacis. There it is. You see those layers? And that this would connect like all the way across to the other side of the Akra fortress. Okay, this is totally wrong. None of this is true. Everything that I mentioned, everything that was found in Givati is completely consistent with that being not the Akra, but a city wall. The most convincing argument that it's not the Akra, or let me word it this way. It would make sense that it was the Akra if it was within the walled city. I mean, we know the Akra was within the city, but we now know, based on the very latest evidence, that the wall to the west, the wall around the southwestern hill of Jerusalem, was only built later. Here it is. I'm quoting from an article by a guy named Donald C. Ariel. It says, the wall surrounding the southwestern hill was built in the days of Simon Thasi, that's Shimon HaMaccabi, or John Hyrcanus, his son, or both. Maybe they both worked on it. But in any case, it was sometime in this range of years, and it was after the Akra was built. So if Givati was the site of the Akra, it was outside, it was not within the city wall. So it's like impossible. Furthermore, that logo on the arrowheads that I said was the logo of Antiochus IV, it's not. There's a very recent article from 2 years ago, which clearly proves that logo, which no one really understands, by the way, what it really means. It's a beta and an epsilon. I was told that it's a how do you say kilshon? A trident. It is not the logo of Antiochus IV, it's the logo of Antiochus VII. So basically everything that was found in Givati is consistent with that being the city wall, not the Akra fortress. And there's a great article by Donald Ariel, which you can get online. You'll have the link when you get this file. And it's a little bit difficult to read, but it's well worth it. Okay, and I have two quick bonus topics, even though I'm over an hour, but it'll only take me a few moments. Just a few comments on things that you all know about. Hopefully my comments are a bit original. Okay, so you all know this stone just below Robinson's Arch, and there's this quotation, Uritem v'sas libchem. It's a quote from the last chapter of Isaiah, and some of you have probably heard or even told people that it's an expression of joy. When you see this, your heart will be glad. And it shows that the Jews were offered the opportunity to rebuild the temple in the year 361 by Julian the Apostate, and that's not true at all. I mean, they were offered the opportunity to rebuild the temple, but Julian the Apostate was killed after 18 months on the throne in battle. And if you look at Isaiah chapter 66, this is totally not an expression of joy. It's a demand for divine retribution on those who destroyed the temple. And you know what? That makes perfect sense. Look at the height of this graffiti. The person who carved it, where was he standing? He was standing on the pile of stones pushed over the side by the Romans. And last but not least, in the Givati parking lot, they found 264 gold coins. And I'll just tell you, the cool thing about them is that they are the only gold coins ever minted in Jerusalem. They were minted in the year 614. This has nothing to do with anything Jewish. This is when the Byzantines were fighting against the Persians. The Persians won the battle, and the guy who was using these coins to pay the soldiers buried them under his floor, and then they ended up in the safe of the Israel Antiquities Authority. And here you can see me with the coins in front of me, holding one in each hand. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And there's probably a zillion questions. So, oh, I can't go them all. I will try to post on the group answers to as many of these questions as I can. Let me see. Wait, Barnea said something that I wanted to respond to. Where was it? Bully for you. Where was it? Okay, it says here, yeah, Barnea wrote quite correctly that Shimon starved them out, not defeated them in battle. And that's quite correct. If you think about it, how did they survive for 23 years after Judah the Maccabee conquered Jerusalem? How did they get food and water? And the answer is, there were lots of Jews who sold them food and water. There were there were a whole bunch of Hellenized Jews living in the fortress. And what Shimon did, it wasn't that he had this great big military campaign. He clamped down and stopped people from selling them food and water. That's about it. I'll be glad to answer any questions by email or on the group. Judy, if you're still here, you can unmute everybody and we can all say goodbye.
Okay, Asha, that was excellent, fascinating, really very, very good. Learned a lot from it. And wait a second, let me put myself also on. Okay, it was excellent, very, very informative. Anybody else have anything they want to add before we say goodbye? Okay, Asha, I commented that if you want to send the links, I will add them to the onto the virtual, where people can see the virtual tour links. Okay, or okay. I can put it, or I can attach it to your video, whatever you'd like.
Also, can Asher, can you send an email through the email group just so that we have your email address? Some people are asking for it.
Hey, I'm typing it as you speak.
Okay.
In the chat.
Okay, and you can save all the chat to see if there's any questions there. With the three dots.
I'm sure there are, but it's late. If there are any, I will go through the chat. I'll copy the whole thing, and I will make sure to answer any questions and put them on the group. This take me too long to read it. I want to bore people. And like I said, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Actually planning, I'm going to volunteer to do another lecture. I don't know, in about a week, if this forum still exists, on a completely different topic on the aqueducts to Jerusalem.
Oh my.
That sounds interesting.
All right, very good.
Okay.
Everybody, thank you very much.